ازيك؟
You know, despite how the genre can be made fun of, I actually have a weird fetish for first-person shooters. And it's not like those games are bad by any means, but more often than not, people will complain that they're too generic and never try anything new. Which, sure, I can get that, but once in a while, you will get a unique first-person shooter that actually does something different and is distinctive in its gameplay. And you can show those losers that they're just a bunch of cucks. So, you know, what better way to show those nerds than to be an even bigger nerd and talk about an obscure PS2 game that literally no one cares about. Where would you guys be without me? Because I'm disgusting casual, I went through a phase of playing a lot of first-person shooters, but most of that was spent trying to find weird, obscure PS2 games that I would enjoy. Among my search, I did eventually find Cold Winter and bought it, mostly because it looked pretty unique, except I'm lying. The reason why I bought it was because it reminded me of Time Splitters, if Time Splitters had a rejected cousin. However, that really didn't matter. I was kind of excited, actually. It did seem a lot like a unique, obscure PS2 game that I would love. But if you aren't me and you actually did research, you would then realize it was made by Swordfish Studios, a company known for such great games like World Championship Rugby and Brian Lara International Cricket 2005. Yeah, and then learn that I have no idea how or why they thought they could handle developing a first-person shooter. But hey, if they can take a leap of faith, so can I! Yay. Cold Winter follows Andrew Sterling, an MI6 agent who is captured by Chinese communist soldiers for reasons, I guess. He gets rescued by a friend and former agent Kim, and they escape together. They meet up with Andrew's friend Daniel Parrish, who helped organize the rescue for Andrew, and he offers Andrew to work for his private security agency. Andrew agrees and gets assigned to get a recon on
محمود الفاروق.
a gun cartel leader in Egypt. And as luck would have it, that guy is up to suspicious shit, and Andrew is gonna stop it. I actually really like the story a lot. On first impressions, it doesn't really seem all that much, but it really is a story that gets better as it goes along, which is kind of rare, especially considering how there usually is an arc of the plot that is worse in comparison to another. It works in this game mainly because the main characters don't really know what's going on either. Like, Andrew gets sent to get recon, and that's exactly what he needs to do, get recon. So in a way, you are learning things just as Andrew and Kim are, which, simultaneously, also makes them more relatable. As opposed to most first-person shooters where your main character is about as stale as fucking bread, Andrew and Kim are actually pretty interesting, but I think that's mainly because they share a lot of banter. And no, I don't mean the "aim better, you daft prick" banter, I mean actual friendly banter, which is honestly pretty cool because these fuckos actually feel like characters who are actual friends. Just hearing Kim say,
"You don't look too bad for a one-man war zone,"
or even the entire cutscene where Andrew is talking with Daniel, it's honestly pretty cool, and just shows how unique these guys are for as much as people think characters in first-person shooters can be like. But I'm worried that I'm kind of hyping it up too much. These losers aren't really the best you'll ever see, seeing as how they end up talking like your typical generic shooter dudes whenever anything expositional happens, which is like 80% of the game, honestly. However, because of the banter, you do notice the characters' personalities quite a bit. Andrew is pretty sarcastic, and he'll be an asshole sometimes, but he still cares about his friends and will do anything for them. He's a pretty rad guy! Kim can also be a bit sassy and sarcastic, but that's just the kind of friendship she has with Andrew. Despite how good the story is, it is pretty messy. Too messy. In fact, you could say it's about as messy as my social skills. Ooh! Some events I have trouble knowing how they exactly progress the story. Like, for example, I need to get blueprints to infiltrate the main compound. However, that's exactly the problem. They never specified what those blueprints were for. Or maybe they did, and I'm just an idiot. But regardless, I don't think anyone mentioned what the purpose of these are, so just not knowing something like that can really throw you off from what you are doing. Another example of how messy the story can be is when the game brings up the Grey Wings. You see, sometimes in between missions, the game will give you this cutscene about this secret organization called the Grey Wings. And it is really out of place and just confuses me. Andrew and Kim aren't really doing anything that should result in giving me a cutscene about them, so it does come across as quite confusing whenever they do mention it. Although they are actually important to the story and do connect, which was awesome because when I figured out how they are important to the story, it really did make me appreciate how well thought out the story was. It's just that they probably could have thought of a different way to present them without making me feel like writing from MGS2. Anyway, Cold Winter is obviously a first-person shooter, And it would be pretty easy to call it another generic shooter because the gameplay does look like every first-person shooter ever. Unlike your Duty of Calls, this is actually a game that you really have to, well, aim. You can't really go full on all the time in this game because your enemies can actually kill you. So the gameplay really encourages you to get in cover and shoot enemies whenever you can. It's really a game where you have to get good in order to actually progress, but that's not to say that's like that all the time. I mean, whenever you go into buildings or go through hallways where enemies are at, you can still go Rambo on them. But where you do actually have to aim properly is in areas that are more spread out and where there's a lot of enemies. Which I don't really mind in a way because I do like to have popcorny action, but at the same time, I also really enjoyed being in more open areas than the latter. It felt more satisfying to take down a bunch of dudes because I actually aimed for once. But a big reason why the gameplay is the way it is surprisingly how health works. For one thing, you have 2 health bars, one for your health and the other one is for your armor. You can pick up armor and ammo from fallen enemies, and that armor will add to its health bar. If you do get attacked, your armor health will deplete first before your actual health will. It does make the game easier though because of the amount of health you have, but it can deplete really fast if you decide to go in guns blazing. So because of the constant bombardment of bullets you can expect to get, actually makes the game more enjoyable because of it. It really forces you to stay back and actually aim properly. With a lot of shooters putting you in God mode, it is pretty cool to see you have a health bar for once. It does remind you that, you can die. However, death isn't really a punishment as you do respawn at the last checkpoint, and because the game does have frequent checkpoints, you can quite literally jump back in. Also, the way the game does make you heal is just something that I thought was pretty cool. You see, you have this health kit that you can use an infinite amount of times. Now, it may seem like the whole God mode thing, but it's actually really cool. For one thing, it isn't spammable. It actually has a whole animation that plays out for you to heal. And it even slows down your movement when you use it. So you can't be out in the open when using it, considering that you'll die even faster because of it. Just from the fact that you actually have to aim and the way the health is treated really encourages the player to actually think for once as you're getting attacked by multiple enemies. It's pretty good, man! Another thing that should be noted is that this game's soundtrack is really awesome. The entire soundtrack feels very espionage-y. It gives you the sense of that you're about to do something badass, and I really like that. It easily complements how action-packed the game is, and it makes firefights even that more intense and epic. It's
hella sick, fam.
That's not to say that the game is spectacular because of it. For one thing, the sensitivity is pretty messed up. The default sensitivity moves not too fast, but fast enough to where you'll miss a target that slightly. Don't worry though, because aim assist is your friend, and it moves slow. Again, not too slow, but slow enough to where you can also miss your targets. So either slightly fast or slightly slow. Take your pick. Although the aim assist I found was the most controllable, but I still miss enemies quite a bit. There's also the fact that the game doesn't really have anything that makes it stand out on its own. I mean, even though I do like the gameplay a lot, there's nothing about that's really unique all that much. It doesn't have a unique setting, unique weapons, and even though I did like the characters, they aren't really that memorable as they really didn't do anything that made them stand out besides something here or there. And as much as I do like the gameplay and how different it is, it's really not anything that stands out. I don't get to try multiple ways of approaching a situation, or I don't even get to stealth, or anything like that. It is pretty linear in that regard. The only thing different the game does is that it has this mechanic of creating cover by flipping tables and some boxes. However, it is used rarely and it doesn't really have a purpose simply based on how the maps are created. That's also another thing that I found lacking in the game, just how plain and generic the maps are. I mean, who can forget such memorable locations like a city? There are some cool areas like a lab and especially the last location, but most of them are just pretty generic. However, that's not to say that I didn't have fun with this game. I really don't mind the linearity and the action of it. I don't mind how the game doesn't have anything notable or strangely unique because I still had a lot of fun with it. For one thing, the guns feel fantastic, and because of how the limbs can go flying off of enemies makes it all the more satisfying and fun. I mean, sure, as much as the generic shooters can be made fun of, I can still find enjoyment in them because of how much fun they can be. It's just that in terms of first-person shooters, Cold Winter does stand out. As a game though, it really doesn't have anything that would stand out besides the story. I really do like the story. Although saying that, since we do games have to automatically be different from each other to have any value. I'm not saying all games should be modern military shooter number 127, but when people talk about how first-person shooters look the same and don't change up the formula, you really have to look deep into the game first. Changing the entire genre is really hard because it can be tough for people to get into, but I still think as long as the game is fun, it still has value to it. Regardless though, I really like Cold Winter. From how the gameplay is to the story, it is definitely worth your time. It's just that the game does suffer from not being all that memorable. But it is still worth the playthrough though. Just the popcorniness of the game just makes it worth a recommendation. You should totally play this game, yo! So yeah, end of video.